My mother always preached that blood is thicker than water, but she never clarified that family loyalty was just a pretty synonym for financial abuse. Standing in a rainy Seattle street with a declined debit card, I realized she hadn't just crossed a line. She had incinerated my entire life to keep my sister warm. I used to believe that safety was a physical place. For the first 19 years of my life, safety was the lock on my bedroom door in our split-level house on the edge of Cincinnati, a flimsy barrier against the chaotic energy my mother, Darlene, and my older sister, Taryn, radiated like nuclear fallout. But by the time I turned 28, safety had evolved. It was no longer a lock, it was a number. It was the balance in my high-yield savings account. The meticulously organized sub-accounts labeled emergency, travels, and future home. It was the silence of my apartment overlooking the Scioto River in Columbus, a space that smelled of lemon polish and peace, bought and paid for by my career as a UX designer. I had built a fortress of solitude and solvency. I was the responsible one, the good daughter Darlene bragged about to the church ladies during Sunday potlucks, even though behind closed doors I was nothing more than the family ATM. Taryn, on the other hand, was the golden child with the chaotic streak. She collected disasters the way other people collected stamps. There was the credit card debt catastrophe of 2018, the failed Etsy shop of 2020, and the crypto bro phase that wiped out her 401k last year. Every time Taryn crashed, Darlene was there with a dustpan, usually demanding I pay for the broom. For years, I handed over cash to keep the peace. But as I stood in my living room, folding blazers into my suitcase for a work trip to Seattle, I felt a shift. I was finally stable. I was finally free of the guilt. Then the phone rang. The screen flashed, "Mom!" My stomach did that familiar, sickening flip, a conditioned response honed over a decade of emergency calls. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but the conditioning was too strong. I answered. "Sweetheart," Darlene started. Her voice was thick, syrupy, dripping with a terrifying sweetness that only appeared when she wanted something massive. "Your sister is in trouble again. Real trouble. She owes a lot." I clamped the phone between my shoulder and ear, continuing to fold a silk blouse. "Define a lot, Mom. Did she max out another visa, or did she crash her car again?" $200,000. I actually laughed. It punched out of me, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "That's not a debt, Mom. That's a mortgage. That's a scam. You're being scammed." "It's not a joke, Jenna." Darlene's voice snapped, the syrup evaporating instantly. "Predatory lenders. She made some bad investments with people. If she doesn't pay, they're going to ruin her future. They'll sue her. She could go to jail." She paused, letting the silence gain weight. "You need to help your sister. You're the only one with savings." It wasn't a question. It was a summons. It was an expectation woven into the fabric of my existence since I was old enough to babysit Taryn, even though she was 5 years older than me. I stopped packing. I walked to the window and looked out at the river, the gray water churning slowly. "No." "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, my voice steady, though my hand trembled against the glass. "I am not paying off $200,000 of debt. She is 33 years old, Mom. She can get a second job. She can file for bankruptcy. She can figure it out." The silence on the other end was cold, heavy, and dangerous. It lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, Darlene hissed, low and venomous, "I'm disappointed in you, Jenna. You have so much, and you won't lift a finger for your own blood, but you'll do the right thing. You always do." She hung up before I could defend myself. I stared at the phone, shaken, but I didn't call back. I didn't transfer a dime. I finished packing, told myself that no was a complete sentence, and boarded my flight the next morning. For the first 2 days in Seattle, I felt a rebellious sort of joy. I crushed my presentations. I drank overpriced coffee at Pike Place. I took photos of the mountains and breathed in the crisp Pacific air, feeling like I had finally severed the cord. My life felt normal. My boundaries held. Until the third night. I was in my Airbnb, a cute loft in Capitol Hill, getting ready to order dinner. I opened my banking app to transfer $50 from my checking to my Fun Money card. The app loaded, the little circle spinning, and then the dashboard appeared. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. 0. My checking account, 0 no zeros. I scrolled down, panic rising in my throat like bile. My savings account, the one with the down payment for a house, 0. My emergency fund, 5 years of scrimping and sacrificing, 0 or zeros. Even the travel card I used for work expenses was drained. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. My hands shook violently as I tapped the screen, praying it was a glitch, a server error, a visual bug. But the transaction history loaded, a long list of wire transfers authorized 24 hours ago. I called the bank immediately, pacing the wooden floors of the loft so hard the downstairs neighbors banged on the ceiling with a broom handle. I didn't care. "Ma'am," the representative said, his voice maddeningly calm. "I see the transactions here. They were domestic wires." "I didn't authorize them," I screamed, tears hot and stinging on my face. "It's fraud. You have to reverse it." "The withdrawals were done using your online login," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. "And the recovery email and phone number were updated last week to verify the identity. According to our records, the transfers were authorized by the secondary user you added, Darlene Kate." My mother's name rang in my skull like a fire alarm in a locked room. The phone slipped from my sweaty palm and clattered onto the floor. She hadn't asked. She hadn't waited for me to do the right thing. She had taken it, all of it. I scrambled for the phone, my vision blurring. I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring, her voice light and airy, fake cheerful, as if she hadn't just detonated my entire existence. "Oh, honey, I was going to call you." "You stole from me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's not stealing," she chirped. "It's family money. Your sister needed help and you were being selfish. You're young. Jenna, you have that fancy job. You'll make it back in a year or two." I stared out at the Seattle skyline, the beautiful lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of pain. I had no way to get home, no money for food, no funds to extend my hotel. She had stripped me bare, leaving me stranded thousands of miles from home, all because I dared to say no. Have you ever had your trust betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you from the world? It's a pain that doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your reality. If you believe toxic family members should be held accountable, smash that like button and subscribe right now. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me where you're reading from and tell me, would you press charges against your own mother? I sat on the floor of that Airbnb until the sun went down, the room turning into a box of shadows. My stomach growled, a cruel reminder that while my life had imploded, my biology hadn't received the memo. I had a half-eaten bag of pretzels in my purse and a bottle of tap water. That was my dinner. That was my reality. I tried to process the conversation with my mother, but her words kept bouncing off the walls of my skull. "You'll make it back." As if my life savings were a library book I could just return a little late. She hadn't just taken money. She had taken my independence. She had forced me back into the very cage I had spent a decade escaping. My phone buzzed against the hardwood floor. I flinched, expecting another call from Darlene, perhaps asking for the PIN to my credit card this time. But it wasn't her. It was my cousin, Becca, who worked at a credit union back in Kentucky. We hadn't spoken in months, but the text on the screen was urgent. "Jenna, are you okay? I just saw Aunt Darlene's Facebook post about God providing miracles. Please tell me you didn't give them the money." My fingers trembled as I typed back. She took it. She accessed my accounts. She said Taryn owed $200K to loan sharks. 3 dots danced on the screen for what felt like an eternity. Then my phone rang. Becca didn't even say hello. "Jenna, listen to me," she said, her voice hushed, likely whispering from her cubicle. "That is a lie, a complete lie. Taryn doesn't have debt sharks after her. I saw her last week at the grocery store. She wasn't crying about debt. She was bragging about moving to Miami." The room spun. "Miami?" "She's moving with her new boyfriend. She told me they needed startup capital for his business so they could live the high life on the beach. She said Darlene was helping them secure funding." Becca paused, and I could hear the horror in her silence. "Jenna, you were the funding." I felt sick, physically, violently sick. Betrayal is a cold knife, but this was a demolition ball. I hung up, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. It wasn't a rescue mission. It was a heist. I opened my banking app again, forcing myself to look at the wreckage. I clicked on the wire transfer details, expanding the little arrow I had been too panicked to check earlier. Recipient: Marcus Hale. Bank: SunTrust, Miami branch. It wasn't a lender. It wasn't a collection agency. I switched to Instagram and typed the name into the search bar. Marcus Hale. He was the first result. His profile was public, a grid of flashy photos, rented Lamborghinis, motivational quotes about hustle culture, and photos of him on a boat. And there, in the most recent photo posted 3 hours ago, was my sister. Taryn was holding a glass of champagne, leaning against a railing with the Miami skyline in the background. The caption read, "New beginnings. Thanks to the believers. Blessed Crypto King." They weren't paying off debt. They were partying. A terrifying clarity washed over me. The changed recovery email, the sudden urgency, the guilt trip. This wasn't an impulsive decision by a desperate mother. This was a calculated, premeditated extraction. They had planned this for weeks. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was the mark. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the numbers on the digital clock shift, calculating the wreckage of my life. I had $0, no credit, and a family that had cannibalized me. But as the sun rose over the misty Seattle skyline, the shock hardened into something colder, sharper. It was a survival instinct I hadn't needed since I left that house at 19. I had one lifeline left: my job. I called my company's corporate travel agency at 5:00 a.m. I had to lie. I told the agent my wallet had been stolen, technically true, though the thief was my mother, and that I needed an emergency flight home charged to the company account. I promised to sort out the expense report later. The agent, a kind woman named Brenda, booked me on the first flight out and even arranged a prepaid ride to the airport. I packed my bags with mechanical precision. Every item folded was a tiny act of reclaiming control. I checked out of the Airbnb, leaving the key under the mat, and stepped into the waiting car. The flight was a blur of white noise and turbulence. I stared out the window at the clouds, but all I could see was Taryn's Instagram post, "New beginnings." My life savings, my security, my hard work, all of it was currently fueling champagne toasts in a rented condo in South Beach. But the most terrifying thought wasn't the money. It was the logistics. To drain my accounts, Darlene needed more than just a lucky guess at a password. She needed my social security number. She needed the answers to my security questions. What was the name of your first pet? What street did you grow up on? She knew those answers because she had been there. She had weaponized our shared history. The intimacy of family was the key that unlocked the vault. I landed in Columbus just as the afternoon rain began to fall. The city looked gray and flat, a stark contrast to the mountains I had left behind. I took another corporate-billed ride to my apartment complex, the dread pooling in my stomach. I just wanted to get inside, lock the door, and call the police. I wanted the safety of my own space. I dragged my suitcase up the 3 flights of stairs to Unit 304. I fished my keys out of my pocket, my hand shaking so hard the metal jingled like chimes. I slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned, pushing harder. The key slid in, but the cylinder was already loose. I turned the handle. The door creaked open. It had been unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I had locked it. I was obsessive about it. I pushed the door open with my foot, swinging my suitcase in front of me like a shield. "Hello?" I called out. The silence that answered me was heavy and stale. I stepped inside. The apartment was dark, the blinds drawn. I flipped the light switch. My breath hitched. The apartment wasn't ransacked. It wasn't trashed. At first glance, it looked almost normal. My sofa was there. The TV was mounted on the wall. But then I looked at the corner where my desk usually sat, my workspace, my sanctuary, where I kept my external hard drives, my design portfolio, and my filing cabinet containing my birth certificate and passport. The desk was empty. The filing cabinet was gone. And on the floor, where the cabinet used to be, lay a single crumpled piece of lined notebook paper. I walked over, my legs feeling like lead, and picked it up. It was Darlene's handwriting. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm keeping your important papers safe until you calm down. We don't want you doing anything rash." I stared at the note until the words dissolved into meaningless blue squiggles. Keeping your important papers safe. It was the ultimate gaslight. She hadn't just robbed me. She had taken my identity hostage. She knew that without my birth certificate and passport, I couldn't easily prove who I was to the bank fraud department, and I certainly couldn't leave the country if things got worse. She was boxing me in. I crumpled the note in my fist and threw it across the room. I wanted to scream, to smash the vase on the counter, to put my fist through the drywall, but I forced myself to breathe, in, out. Panic was Darlene's currency. I refused to pay it. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. It felt like a betrayal of the highest order. In my family, you didn't call the cops. You hid the bruises, you paid the bail, you hushed the neighbors, but that contract was broken. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. They were young, bored, and clearly annoyed to be dealing with a non-violent call on a rainy Tuesday. I showed them the empty spot where the cabinet had been. I showed them the note. I explained the wire transfers, the $200,000, the lies about the loan sharks. Officer Miller, a stocky man with a receding hairline, looked at the note and then back at me. "So, let me get this straight. Your mother has a key?" "Yes," I said, my voice tight. "For emergencies. Only for emergencies. And she left a note saying she's holding the items for you? She didn't destroy them. She stole them," I insisted. "She took my passport and my birth certificate to stop me from reporting her for grand larceny." Miller sighed, scratching his jaw. "Ma'am, look. To us, this looks like a civil dispute. You gave her a key. She's a family member. She left a note saying she's not keeping them permanently. Unless there's sign of forced entry or she threatens you physically, there's not much we can do here. You'll have to take this up in civil court." "Civil court?" I laughed hysterically. "She emptied my bank accounts. I can't afford a lawyer for civil court." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the other officer said, shrugging. "Write a report if you want. But the prosecutor isn't going to touch a mother safekeeping her daughter's documents with a key she was given." They left 5 minutes later. I stood in the center of my apartment, the silence ringing in my ears. The police weren't coming to save me. The bank was investigating, but that would take weeks. Darlene had checkmated me. She knew exactly how the system worked, knew exactly how to skirt the edge of criminal enough to make it complicated. I couldn't stay here. If she had a key, she could come back. She could come back with Taryn. She could come back with Marcus. I grabbed my suitcase, which I hadn't even unpacked. I threw in the few remaining valuables I could find: my laptop, a backup hard drive she had missed, and a jewelry box. I walked to the door and left the key, the one she had a copy of, on the counter. I walked out of the building and into the rain. I had no money for a hotel. I had no car. I had sold it last year to rely on public transit and save more money. I sat on a bench at the bus stop, shielding my phone from the drizzle. I had one contact left. Someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. someone Darlene hated more than anyone on earth because he was the only person who had ever beaten her at her own game. My father. My thumb hovered over the contact named Frank for a long minute. In my phone, he wasn't Dad. He was just Frank. That was Darlene's doing. After the divorce, she had waged a scorched earth campaign against him, painting him as a deadbeat, a loser, a man who didn't care about his perfect daughters. I had believed her for a long time. It was only when I got older that I realized Frank hadn't abandoned us. He had been pushed out by a woman who needed total control. I hadn't spoken to him since I missed his 50th birthday party because Taryn had a crisis regarding a breakup, and I was forced to mediate. I pressed call. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up, shame burning hotter than the cold rain on my neck, when a gruff voice answered, "Jenna?" He sounded older, tired, but there was no hesitation. "Dad," I croaked, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. I need help. Where are you?" "The bus stop on High Street, near my apartment. Stay there, I'm 20 minutes out." He didn't ask why. He didn't ask for money. He just came. 19 minutes later, a beat-up Ford F-150 pulled up to the curb. The passenger door creaked open, and there was my father. He looked grayer, a little heavier, wearing a flannel shirt covered in sawdust. He looked at my soaking wet hair, my suitcase, and my tear-streaked face. He didn't say a word. He just reached over and blasted the heat. I climbed in, shivering. The cab smelled like old coffee and wood shavings, a scent I had forgotten, but one that instantly unclenched the knot in my chest. We drove in silence out of the city, toward the rural outskirts where land was cheap and neighbors were scarce. He didn't speak until we were inside his small A-frame cabin, sitting at a scratch pine table with mugs of hot tea. "Talk," he said. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. So I did. I told him everything. The $200,000, the fake debt, the Miami condo, the stolen passport, the police officer who called it a civil dispute. I expected him to be shocked. I expected him to tell me I was stupid for trusting her. Instead, Frank just nodded slowly, staring into his tea. "She finally did it," he murmured. "She finally ate her young." "You're not surprised?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "Jenna, why do you think we got divorced?" He looked up, his blue eyes hard. "It wasn't because I cheated, like she told you. It was because I came home one day and the college fund I'd started for you girls was gone. She spent it on a business opportunity for her brother. We lost the house because of that. I left before she could bankrupt me completely." I sat back, stunned. Another lie unraveled. "But this is different," Frank said, leaning forward. "This Marcus guy. You said his last name is Hale?" "Yeah, Marcus Hale." Frank stood up and walked to a bookshelf overflowing with binders and loose papers. He pulled out a thick, dusty folder and slammed it onto the table. "I've been keeping tabs on her," he admitted, "and anyone she associates with, just in case she tried to come after my pension." He flipped the folder open. "I did a background check on Taryn's last boyfriend and the one before that. But this Hale guy, I saw his name pop up on a forum I monitor." "A forum?" "For victims of Ponzi schemes," Frank said grimly. "He goes by different aliases. Mark Hall, Marcus H., but he runs the same play. He finds a woman with access to family money, convinces her he's an investing genius, drains the accounts, and then vanishes to a non-extradition country." He tapped a grainy photo of Marcus on a boat. "He's not Taryn's boyfriend, Jenna. He's her handler. And if they're in Miami, they're staging for the exit. Once they leave the country, your money is gone forever." Frank looked at me, a fierce determination igniting in his eyes. "The police won't help you because they think it's a family squabble. So we're not going to use the police." "What are we going to do?" "I've got a little money put away. Not much, but enough for 2 plane tickets to Florida." He closed the folder. "We're going to Miami, and we're going to get your life back." Miami hit me like a physical blow. a wall of humidity, exhaust fumes, and aggressive opulence. While my life was falling apart in gray, rainy Ohio, here the sun was shining with mocking brightness. Frank rented a nondescript sedan with cash, his face set in a grim line as he navigated the traffic towards South Beach. "Remember the plan," Frank said, his eyes scanning the road. "We locate, we observe, we intercept. Do not approach Darlene. She'll spot you and scream bloody murder." I nodded. Adjusting the oversized sunglasses and baseball cap Frank had bought me at a gas station, I felt like a spy in a bad movie, but the stakes were nauseatingly real. We tracked them to the Azure Sky Lounge, a rooftop bar atop a hotel that cost more per night than my monthly rent. It was the location tagged in Taryn's latest post, a boomerang of clinking champagne glasses. We took a table in the far corner, obscured by a large potted palm. It didn't take long to find them. They were the loudest table there. Seeing them in person was worse than the photos. Darlene was lounging on a white sectional, laughing with her head thrown back. She was wearing a designer caftan and oversized sunglasses, looking like a woman without a care in the world. She didn't look like a mother who had just destroyed her youngest daughter. She looked liberated. Taryn was next to her, draped over Marcus like a trophy. She looked manic, her laughter a little too shrill, her movements jerky. She was drinking fast. And then there was Marcus. He was handsome in a generic plastic way. Tan skin, veneered smile, expensive watch. But while the women laughed, he was disengaged. He was typing furiously on 2 different phones, his eyes darting around the rooftop like a trapped animal looking for an exit. "Look at him," Frank murmured, leaning in. "He's not celebrating, he's closing." "Closing what?" "The exit strategy. Look at the bag by his feet." I squinted. Tucked under the table, near Marcus's loafers, was a black leather duffel bag. It was small, nondescript, but he kept his leg pressed against it constantly. "He's not staying," Frank said. "He's mobile." Marcus stood up suddenly. He said something to Taryn, patted her shoulder with a dismissive, patronizing motion, and walked toward the elevators. Taryn's face fell, a flash of desperate anxiety crossing her features, but Darlene just poured her more champagne. "I'm following him," I whispered. "Jenna, wait. Dad, if he leaves with that bag, it's over." I slipped away before Frank could stop me. I kept my head down, heart hammering against my ribs, and followed Marcus into the cool marble lobby. He didn't go to the elevators. He walked briskly toward a quiet alcove near the restrooms, checking his watch. I hid behind a pillar, holding my breath. He raised a phone to his ear. "It's done," Marcus said, his voice low but clear. "The crypto wallet is cold. I'm clearing the accounts now. No, she has no idea. I told her we're buying a condo tomorrow." He laughed. A cold, dry sound. "Tonight, 2 a.m., private charter out of Opelika. Destination is Belize. Don't worry, the mom and the sister are staying here. Let them deal with the hotel bill." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. He wasn't taking Taryn to a new life. He wasn't even partners with them. He was dumping them. He was going to vanish with my $200,000, leaving my mother and sister stranded in Miami with nothing but a maxed-out hotel tab and a hangover. I looked at my watch. It was 4 p.m. I had 10 hours to stop a ghost. I sprinted back to the table, my heart rattling against my ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. Frank looked up, instantly reading the panic in my eyes. He dropped a $20 bill on the table and steered me toward the exit, away from the prying eyes of the staff. "Talk to me," he commanded once we were in the relative safety of the hotel corridor. "He's leaving," I gasped. "Tonight, 2 a.m., a private charter from Opelika to Belize. He's not taking them, Dad. He called it a clean break. He's clearing the accounts now." Frank swore, a harsh guttural sound. "Belize. Non-extradition. If he gets on that plane, Jenna, the money is gone, and so is he." "We have to call the police," I said, reaching for my phone. "And say what?" Frank grabbed my wrist, stopping me. "That a man is going on a trip. The police already told you this is a civil matter. By the time we explain the wire fraud, get a warrant and get dispatched to the airfield. He'll be sipping rum punch on a beach. It's 4:15 p.m. We don't have time for bureaucracy. So what do? Mug him? No, Frank said, his eyes narrowing. We need access to that phone. He said he's clearing the accounts. That means the money is currently in transit, probably in a crypto wallet on his device. If we can get him to transfer it back, or if we can get the device, we win. He's not just going to hand it over. He won't, Frank agreed, but Taryn might. If we can convince her she's being played, I scoffed. Taryn? She thinks he's the messiah of Bitcoin. She won't believe us. She will if she sees the truth, Frank said. We have to blow up their little party, right now. We marched back to the rooftop bar. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long orange shadows across the deck. Darlene and Taryn were still there, though Marcus hadn't returned from his phone call yet. Darlene was reapplying lipstick, using her phone as a mirror. I stepped out from behind the palm frond. Frank right beside me. "Hello, Mother." Darlene dropped her lipstick. It rolled across the glass table with a hollow clatter. She stared at me, then at Frank, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Jenna?" she squeaked. Then her eyes hardened as they landed on my father. "Frank, what on earth? Are you stalking us?" "We're saving you," Frank said, his voice low and dangerous. "Shut up and listen." "Don't you dare speak to me like that." Darlene stood up, her face flushing red. "You have no right. We are celebrating Taryn's success, security." "He's not coming back, Taryn," I cut in, ignoring Darlene and locking eyes with my sister. Taryn looked glassy-eyed, sun-drunk and champagne-soaked. "Marcus. He's in the lobby right now arranging a flight to Belize for 2 a.m. Alone." Taryn blinked slowly. "You're lying." "You're just jealous. He's buying us a condo." "He calls you the Mark," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I heard him. He's draining the money into a cold wallet. He's going to leave you here with the bill, Taryn, just like he did to the women in Chicago and Seattle." "Liar!" Darlene shrieked, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "You're just bitter because I used your stagnant money to help your sister actually build something. You want us to fail." "I want my life back," I screamed back. "He's a con man, Mom. Check his bag. He keeps it by his feet because it has his passport and the cold storage drive. If he really loves you, why is he carrying his passport to a bar?" Taryn looked down at the empty spot where Marcus's bag had been. Confusion flickered in her eyes. Just then, the elevator chimed. Marcus stepped out, smiling smoothly, unaware of the ambush waiting for him. He spotted us, and for a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes went wide, cold and predatory. He didn't walk toward the table. He turned on his heel and bolted for the fire escape. "Get him!" Frank roared, his voice booming over the terrible remix of a Dua Lipa song. I didn't need to be told twice. I vaulted over the low glass partition, my sneakers skidding on the polished teak deck, and threw myself at the heavy metal door Marcus had just slammed shut. I hit the push bar with my shoulder, bursting onto the metal grate of the fire escape just in time to see the tail of Marcus's linen jacket disappear down the next flight of stairs. "Stop!" I screamed, the sound raw and tearing at my throat. He didn't stop. He was fast, moving with the desperate agility of a man who had practiced his escape route. I could hear his loafers clanging rhythmically against the metal steps, a staccato beat of panic. I scrambled after him, gripping the rusty railing, taking the steps 2 at a time. The humidity of the Miami evening made the air feel like soup, thick and suffocating. My lungs burned. Above me, I heard the heavy thud of my father's work boots, slower but steady, a relentless force following in my wake. "Jenna, don't let him get to the street," Frank yelled down the shaft. "If he gets a cab, he's gone." I pushed harder, ignoring the stitch in my side. We were descending into the bowels of the hotel, past the guest floors, down toward the service alley. The smell of expensive perfume was replaced by the stench of rotting garbage and stale beer. I hit the ground floor landing just as Marcus kicked open the final exit door. I burst out into the alleyway, the sudden sunlight blinding me for a second. Marcus was 20 feet ahead, sprinting toward a black sedan parked illegally near a dumpster. He was fumbling in his pocket, pulling out a key fob. "Marcus!" I lunged forward. He spun around, his face slick with sweat, eyes wild. He wasn't reaching for the car door anymore. He was holding up his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. "Stay back!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "One step closer and I execute the transfer. I'll scramble the keys. You'll never see a dime." I froze. My sneakers skid on the asphalt. I held my hands up, breath heaving in my chest. "Don't." Frank burst into the alley a second later, red-faced and panting. He stopped beside me. Sizing up the situation instantly, he saw the phone. He saw the threat. "You're cornered, son," Frank wheezed, stepping forward menacingly. "Give it up." "I'm not your son," Marcus spat. "And I'm not cornered. I'm leaving. You two are going to stand there and watch me drive away, or I delete the encryption key and your money vanishes into the ether. Choose." He backed toward the car door, his eyes never leaving us, that thumb still hovering over the kill switch. He was winning. He knew the leverage he held. The $200,000 was nothing to him, just another score, but it was my entire life. He was willing to burn it just to spite me. "Open the door," Marcus commanded, reaching behind him for the handle. "I wouldn't do that," a voice said from the shadows of the loading dock. Marcus flinched. We all looked. Taryn stepped out from behind a stack of crates. She looked like a wreck, mascara running down her face, hair wild, but in her hand she held a heavy red fire extinguisher. "Taryn?" Marcus blinked, his charm reflex kicking in. "Babe, thank God. Tell them to back off. These psychos are trying to rob us." Taryn looked at him. Then she looked at the black duffel bag he had slung over his shoulder, the bag he swore he didn't have. "You left me," she whispered. "You ran." "I was going to get the car," Marcus lied, his smile straining. "Come on, baby, we're going to Belize. Just you and me." "You have a ticket for one," I said quietly. Taryn looked at the phone in his hand, the device that held my future. She looked at Marcus, the man she had defended, the man she had ruined her sister for. "Taryn, get in the car," Marcus snapped. Losing patience, Taryn tightened her grip on the extinguisher. "No." "You're pathetic," Marcus sneered, his mask dissolving completely into a look of pure disgust. "You really think you're worth a condo in Miami? You were just the key, Taryn. The dumb, desperate key to your sister's bank account." He turned back to me, his thumb hovering over the screen. "Say goodbye to your savings, Jenna." But he never got the chance to press the button. With a primal scream that sounded like 3 decades of repressed failure erupting at once, Taryn swung the red canister. She didn't aim for his head. She aimed for the arm holding the phone. Crack. The sound of metal hitting bone echoed off the brick walls. Marcus howled, his wrist buckling under the impact. The phone flew out of his hand, skittering across the dirty asphalt like a stone on a frozen pond. "Get it!" Frank shouted, launching himself at Marcus before the con man could recover. I didn't think. I dove. I threw myself onto the oily pavement, scrambling on my hands and knees toward the device. My jeans tore, my palms scraped raw, but my eyes were locked on the glowing screen lying face up near the dumpster. Marcus kicked out, catching Frank in the shin, but my father was fueled by a rage that transcended pain. He slammed Marcus into the side of the black sedan, pinning him there with a forearm to the throat. "Don't you move! Stay down!" I grabbed the phone. My heart hammered so hard my vision swam. The screen was still active. The transfer bar was loading. Transfer status. Pending. 85%. "Cancel!" I screamed at the screen, tapping the button frantically. "Cancel! Cancel! Cancel!" The screen froze. A spinning wheel appeared. Processing cancellation. Time seemed to stretch into infinity. I could hear Marcus wheezing under my father's grip, Taryn sobbing quietly while still clutching the fire extinguisher, and the distant wail of sirens growing louder. Then a green checkmark appeared. Transaction canceled. Funds returned to wallet. I slumped against the dumpster, clutching the phone against my chest, tears finally spilling over. I checked the balance. It was there, all of it. The $200,000 sitting in a crypto wallet, ready to be transferred back to a real bank. "I got it," I choked out, looking at Frank. "Dad, I got it." Frank let out a breath, his shoulders sagging, though he didn't loosen his grip on Marcus. Good girl. The alleyway flooded with blue and red lights. 2 Miami-Dade police cruisers screeched to a halt at the entrance of the alley, blocking Marcus's escape route. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting commands, and behind them, stumbling in her high heels, came Darlene. She looked from Marcus, pinned against the car, to Taryn, holding the weapon, to me, sitting in the dirt with the evidence. Her face was a mask of horror, not for us, but for the shattering of her illusion. "Taryn," Darlene gasped, ignoring me entirely. "What did you do?" Marcus said, "He said it was a misunderstanding." Taryn looked at our mother. For the first time in her life, she didn't look for approval. She dropped the fire extinguisher with a heavy clang. "He was stealing it, Mom," Taryn said, her voice hollow. "And you helped him." The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the alleyway in chaotic strokes of blue and red, but for the first time in days, my mind was quiet. I watched from the back of an ambulance, a blanket draped over my shoulders, as officers shoved a handcuffed Marcus into the back of a squad car. He was screaming about his rights, about lawyers, about how we were all low-level NPCs, but nobody was listening. The police had taken the phone as evidence, but not before I'd transferred the funds back to a secure holding account under Frank's supervision. The money was safe. Darlene was standing near the hotel entrance, wringing her hands, trying to charm a female officer who looked entirely unimpressed. When she saw me walking toward Frank's rental car, she broke away and ran over. "Jenna!" "Thank God!" She reached for me, but I stepped back, the movement sharp and instinctive. She froze. "Jenna, you have to listen. I didn't know he was going to run. I thought we were building a future. You can't leave us here. The hotel bill, the flights back." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a mother, but a stranger who had been willing to sacrifice my survival for her fantasy. "I'm not paying the bill, Mom," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm not paying for your flight. But how will we get home?" "Ask Taryn," I said, gesturing to my sister who was sitting on the curb giving a statement to a detective. "She's the one who stopped him. She's the one who woke up. Maybe you should try following her lead for once." I turned to Frank. "I'm ready." We left them there on the sidewalk, Darlene shouting my name, Taryn looking down at her hands in shame. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and the most necessary. 3 months later, the view from my window was different. I wasn't overlooking the Scioto River in the city anymore. I was looking out at a dense line of pine trees in Hocking Hills, just a few miles down the road from Frank's cabin. I had used a chunk of my recovered savings to put a down payment on a small, sturdy house with a porch and a wood stove. The legal fallout was messy. Marcus was facing multiple counts of wire fraud and grand larceny. Taryn avoided jail time by testifying against him, revealing where he hid his other assets. She was working at a diner now, living in a studio apartment, and for the first time paying her own bills. We texted occasionally. It was a start. Darlene was blocked on everything. Last I heard from Frank, she was telling the church ladies that I had abandoned her in her time of need. I didn't care. I walked into my kitchen, where the smell of brewing coffee filled the air. Frank was at the table, fixing a hinge on my back door. "That should hold," he said, testing the swing. "Nobody's getting in without a battering ram." I smiled, pouring 2 mugs. "Thanks, Dad." I used to think safety was a number in a bank account. I used to think it was a locked door in a lonely apartment. But as I sat down across from the man who had driven across the country to save me when I had nothing to offer him but trouble, I realized I had been wrong. Safety wasn't about building walls to keep people out. It was about knowing who would be standing there with you when the walls fell down. I took a sip of coffee. The chaos was over. The debt was paid, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was free. Reflect on this. Family is supposed to be your safe haven, but sometimes they are the storm you have to survive. It takes immense courage to cut the cord and choose yourself. If this story made your blood boil or gave you the courage to set a boundary today, hit that like button until it breaks and subscribe to the channel. I want to know your story. Comment below. I chose me if you've ever had to walk away from a toxic family member to save your own life. You are not alone.